Hello, this is Joy Horner from Birth Joy. Still recovering after my operation, so still in my pyjamas, although I will be going out later. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about perineal care today because it's just a big hot topic at the moment, isn't it? And the reason for me doing this today was I've just read Rachel Reed's fabulous piece on the care bundles that are being offered to people in childbirth. Now, she is in Australia, but their care bundle isn't a lot different to the care bundles being offered in the UK on the back of the OASI trial, so the Obstetric Anal Sphincter Injury study. And it was looking at ways to prevent the really nasty third and fourth degree tears, which sometimes happen. I think they happen in about 3 or 4% of cases. Now I was going to say in obstetric care or hospital care. I'd have to go back and look at the data. I'm no good at numbers and things like that. But what I know is when I worked in hospital, it seemed like there were quite a few of these third and fourth degree tears. And now I've been mainly, over my 19-year career, working in birth centres and in home births. They're incredibly rare. And I just wonder about applying this, the findings of this study to every woman who probably doesn't need it. So even if you're having hospital obstetric care, only 3 to 4% of women are going to have this. And yeah, these are really serious life-altering injuries that people sometimes sustain in childbirth. But I think we've got to look at what else we're doing. Okay, the perineum doesn't exist in isolation. It is in fact attached to a person, and the position that the woman's in and how hydrated she is and whether she's taught to actively push or not during her labour, and loads and loads of things actually affect whether she's likely to have a nasty tear or not, as well as the speed that the baby's coming. If the baby's a compound presentation, sometimes babies, instead of tucking their shoulders in nicely and sort of slithering out, some babies come out like this. Some babies have got two hands against their head, and it makes a slightly wider diameter, across the shoulders coming out, so they can contribute to tears. I think the difference that I've personally seen between never sure my menopausal brain's working correctly, between the hospital births I've seen and the home or birth centre births is we don't do directed pushing. We have less constraints, less time limits on the second stage. The woman's free to choose her own position and rarely lays on her back to give birth. Maybe seen 1 or 2 women actually choose to lay on their back and give birth. It's incredibly rare. What else? And maybe even continuity of carer. If women know and trust me, then they can guide their own babies out. I don't need to tell them when to push and when not to push. I think that's the same for a majority of births. But people get inhibited. Quite often women are naked, they're very vulnerable in labour. And quite often if something's stinging and smarting, as it does sometimes when a baby's head emerges, it's a normal instinct to put your hand down there and sort of feel what's going on, isn't it? And I've seen women, when I've worked in birth centres and the women don't know me, reach down instinctively because something's hurting, and then look up at me and look ashamed and take their hand away. With a known midwife with continuity of carer, I'm not going to be judging you. I know if things sting, you put your hand down there. And I think women receiving their own babies, women that are hands-on with their own babies, can control the speed that baby is coming out because they know what it feels like, because they're attached to it, You know, if baby's coming too fast, you know, and yeah, or baby needs a bit of time to ease out gently, you know, the woman is best controlling that. You know, we're not experts. We don't know what it feels like. We don't know if it feels like things are stretching well or not, do we? We get a bit of an idea if we're nosy and have a look. Um, but yeah, and it's not always to do with size of the baby either. You know, I've seen some very big babies emerge, and women don't have any perineal injuries whatsoever. So our perineum is meant to stretch. This is what it does, in the same way that male parts get bigger and smaller. Ina May Gaskin reminds us of this. She says, have you ever stood behind a cart horse when it poops and you see its anus go like that, and then back again? This is what vaginas do. Vaginas are elastic. You know, they are meant to expand and they are meant to go back together afterwards, and this is what they do in the vast majority of cases. I think another reason that I don't see as many tears at home, and I have to put my hands up and say I've never seen a 3rd or 4th degree tear in my practice. Now, I'm not a midwife on a busy labour ward. I haven't seen thousands and thousands and thousands of births, but I have seen hundreds. So you'd think I would have seen 1 or 2, but I've always worked in low risk and predominantly as continuity of care midwife. So what I was going to say is a long-winded way of saying that I think the oxytocin has a huge impact on women's tissues. And we know this, don't we? We know this as women. We know that if we're in the mood and receptive for lovemaking, you know, it's all smooth and great and no worries. If we're trying to rush a quickie, you know, our other half says, we've got 5 minutes before the I don't know, child is due to wake up for breakfast or whatever, or I'm off to work, you know, we've got 5 minutes, let's do it now. Things can be a bit ouchy, you know, the juices aren't flowing, the tissues aren't engorged with blood and you know, swelling so that they can open, you know, and it's a bit ouchy and a bit sore sometimes. So I hear. But women know this. We know our bodies. So we know we have to get our oxytocin high and actually feel that loving vibe for everything to stretch and accommodate as it should do. And this is no different in childbirth. This is no different whatsoever. We need to keep oxytocin high. So a woman that's in a really loving environment, feeling loved by everyone around her, not feeling judged by her midwife because she knows her midwife and she knows her midwife loves her, is more likely to have a perineum that stretches easily and, you know, can let the baby out. And yeah, you know, it's still a bit ouchy and, you know, but not for long. But yeah, and if women know that we trust them and believe in them, they can do this. They can do this without sustaining really nasty injuries. Excuse me. And there still will be the odd 1 or 2. I'm sure in my career I will see a 3rd or 4th degree tear. You know, sometimes they just happen and we've no idea why. But I haven't seen it yet, and I do everything in my power to make sure women do not sustain unnecessary injury. And they're very unlikely to in my care, because I don't do episiotomies, and one of my rules is never say never. I've done 1 in the past, God, I gotta think now, 13 years since I've been independent. Yeah, I've done 1, and that was to save a baby's life. It was a breech baby and we tried everything we could to release the head. Sometimes, yeah, there's a bit of difficulty releasing the head, and nothing was working, and we tried everything. So I did do an episiotomy in an attempt to help this baby. We did get him out. It wasn't the episiotomy that got him out, so even that was unnecessary. But episiotomies can then turn into 3rd degree tears. So it's a life or death thing to do for someone. I would not cut a woman's vagina unless it was life and death. And I wish other midwives and obstetricians would think this way. Of course, you're much more likely to have a third or fourth degree tear if you have an instrumental birth, and you're much more likely to have an instrumental birth if you're in hospital or if you're induced, because there are more time limits and things are rushed, and if you don't get your baby out in time and oxytocin's really low and your baby gets distressed, and all of that sort of stuff. So I only normally rant for 10 minutes. I'm over my 10 minutes now, but basically there's an awful lot of things that women can do and midwives can assist with to prevent third and fourth degree tears that do not involve holding the woman's perineum, do not involve putting pressure on the baby's head. Hannah Darlin has written up about the use of warm compresses, and there's good research to show that a warm compress on a perineum might actually help prevent tearing. As I said, position, flat on your back, forced pushing, instrumental birth, all of these things are going to make it more likely that you have one of these severe tears. So I think I better wrap it up there. I know I've forgotten lots and lots. There's lots you can do. Don't have your waters broken either. I believe, there's no evidence in this, there's no research on this that I've found, but I believe, in my experience, that if you don't have your waters broken, that lovely slippy bag, bag of waters containing your baby, is nice and smooth, isn't it, coming down the vagina, and it sort of dilates it gently before the baby's head comes down, and it's like a slippery layer between baby's heads and our vagina. And I think that's another really good reason that people don't have tears in my practice, because their membranes are intact, until they go spontaneously. There are lots and lots of other things which I know I've forgotten, but that's my main point, that we don't need to have our hands on women's perineums, particularly if they're low risk, because I'm not trying to prevent obstetric anal sphincter injury.